All right, welcome back. Today we're going to do a deep dive into something kind of different, a children's book called Rose Blanche.
Yeah, you might be thinking a children's book,
Yeah.
really. But I think you're going to be surprised
Yeah, stick with us on this one.
because Rose Blanche is, well, it tackles World War II, but it does it through the eyes of a child. So we're going to kind of peel back the layers of the story and see how something seemingly so simple can be so deep and meaningful about history and humanity and the power of art, really.
And what's even more interesting is that, get this, the book's illustrator, Roberto Innocenti, he actually lived through World War II as a child in Italy.
Right.
So this is a firsthand perspective here.
Exactly, yeah. And we're going to be using a lot of research and analysis on this one to really understand this book.
Hmm.
And we're going to uncover the historical context, decode the symbolism, and look at how Rose Blanche connects to these kind of big universal themes like innocence, compassion, and the courage to resist.
Okay, so let's set the stage here. For those who haven't read it, the story follows Rose Blanche. She's a young girl living in Germany during World War II. And at first, she's really just curious about all the soldiers and trucks that are starting to kind of appear in her town, almost like it's exciting.
Yeah, there's a sense of naivete, right? It's like she's watching these changes, but the true weight of what's happening hasn't really hit her yet.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that makes it so powerful is when things start to shift.
Yeah. She sees a boy who's trying to escape from an army truck, and the town's mayor, who, by the way, is drawn to look a lot like Hitler, forces the boy back onto the truck. And I remember when I first read this book and I saw that illustration, it just, chills down my spine. Subtle, but so effective.
Oh, yeah, that's Innocenti. He's a genius. He's not hitting you over the head with it. But those visual cues are saying so much.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. To a child reading this,
Yeah.
the mayor represents authority. So, by making him look like Hitler, Innocenti's very subtly linking authority with the Nazi regime, even if the child doesn't even consciously realize it. It's like planting a seed.
Wow, that's so interesting. Makes you think about how children process propaganda, especially during wartime. Like, do they even realize it's happening?
That's a great question, and it's one that scholars have been debating for years and years. But what we do know is that children are so perceptive. They're sponges.
Right.
They soak up information from their surroundings, even if they can't fully articulate what they're seeing and what they're hearing.
And in Rose Blanche, Rose's journey of discovery, it really starts after that encounter with the mayor and the boy. She follows the truck, and it leads her to this place, surrounded by barbed wire, a concentration camp. And behind those fences, she sees all these hungry, scared children. And it's really her first glimpse into the horrors of what's happening.
Yeah, and you can actually see that shift in Rose in the illustrations too, like the bright colors and kind of like the playful lines that were the beginning of the book. They start to fade, and then they're replaced with these more somber tones and stark imagery. It's almost like a visual representation of her innocence being like chipped away.
Right, and it's so powerful because Rose doesn't turn away from what she's seen. She doesn't pretend it's not happening. Instead, she starts secretly taking food from her own home and bringing it to the children in the camp.
Right.
Such a small act, but so incredibly brave.
It is. And it brings us to another fascinating layer of this book, which is the connection to the real-life Rose Blanche group. These were young Germans, mostly students and intellectuals, who were actually actively resisting the Nazi regime.
Oh, okay. So I have to admit, I didn't know anything about this group before. Tell me more.
Well, they were incredibly courageous. They risked their lives to distribute leaflets with anti-Nazi messages. They created these underground newspapers to kind of counter the propaganda that was being spread by the Nazi regime. They even helped people escape persecution, hiding them, giving them false documents, anything they could do to help.
Wow, that's so incredibly brave. I mean, these were just young people, students, going up against this really powerful and ruthless machine.
They were. And sadly, a lot of them paid the ultimate price for their courage. But by naming his protagonist Rose Blanche, Innocenti is making sure that their story is not forgotten. You know, he's connecting Rose's small acts of compassion to this larger historical narrative of resistance.
It really makes you think about the different ways people can resist injustice, even in the darkest of times. It doesn't always have to be these grand gestures, right? Sometimes small acts of kindness can be so powerful.
Exactly. Rose's decision to help those children might seem small, especially in the face of these huge atrocities, but it represents a refusal to be complicit in that whole system of oppression. And that, in itself, is a form of resistance.
And it's a message that I think resonates so deeply, even today. Like, We all face situations where we have to choose whether to speak up or stay silent, to act or look away. And I think Rose Blanche reminds us that even small acts of courage, they can make a difference.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that makes this book so timeless. It's not just a story about World War II. It's a story about the human spirit and its capacity for kindness and resistance in the face of evil.
You mentioned earlier that the ending of Rose Blanche really stuck with you. That gunshot and Rose's disappearance, it leaves so many questions unanswered. Why do you think Innocenti chose to end the book that way?
That's a great question, and I think it's one of the most brilliant things about this book. By leaving the ending ambiguous, he's really forcing us to confront the harsh realities of war and the uncertain fates of so many innocent people.
Right. It doesn't really give us those easy answers
You know,
or closure. It's unsettling, but incredibly thought-provoking.
it is. It challenges us to think about what happened to Rose, to those children in the camp, to everyone who disappeared during the war. It makes us grapple with the complexities of history and the lasting impact that these events have, even, long after the fighting's over.
Maybe it also encourages us to seek out more information, to learn more about this period and the people who lived through it, to not let their stories be forgotten.
Absolutely. I think Rose Blanche can be a starting point for a much deeper exploration, a catalyst for understanding. And that's one of the most valuable things a book can do, is to make you curious and make you thirst for knowledge.
I couldn't agree more. So we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into Rose Blanche. We've explored the plot, the historical context, the symbolism, and the deeper themes. But there's one more aspect I want to touch on before we move on: the book's impact and legacy.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Rose Blanche has had a really profound impact on readers of all ages since it was published. It's been translated into so many different languages. It's gotten critical acclaim all over the world. It even won the Mildred L. Batchelder Award, which is given to, outstanding children's books that are translated into English. And it's been recognized for its artistic merit, its historical significance, and, its powerful message.
It's pretty amazing to think about the reach of this seemingly simple children's book. Why do you think it's resonated with so many people around the world?
I think it's because it speaks to something very universal in the human experience. It doesn't preach. It doesn't offer easy answers. It just presents a story, a child's story, that connects deeply with our own experiences of compassion, loss, and our search for meaning in a world that can feel very complicated. And, those themes go beyond cultural and linguistic barriers.
Yeah, that's so true. And it really reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope, always the potential for kindness and resistance.
Yeah.
And that's a message that continues to inspire and challenge readers today, just as much as it did when the book was first published.
Well said. And with that, I think we've covered a lot of ground here in part one of our deep dive into Rose Blanche.
Yeah.
But there's still so much more to uncover.
Yeah.
It's really amazing how Rose Blanche, a book for children, can spark such deep conversations about history and resistance.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how historically accurate is it? Does it really capture what life was like for children in Germany during World War II?
That's a great question. And while Rose Blanche is a fictional story, it's definitely deeply rooted in the reality of wartime Germany.
Right.
The presence of soldiers, the rationing, that constant fear and uncertainty.
Yeah.
Those were all very real parts of daily life for children back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the concentration camp,
Right.
the barbed wire, the emaciated children, those are such powerful images.
Yeah.
Is that an accurate depiction?
Innocenti definitely doesn't shy away from the truth.
Right.
Those images are definitely consistent with historical accounts of concentration camps.
Right.
He doesn't explicitly show the most horrific aspects. Remember, this is a book for children.
Right.
But those visuals are still powerful enough to give you a sense of the gravity of the situation.
Yeah, it's such a delicate balance, isn't it? Telling the truth about this horrific event while still making it accessible to younger readers.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where I think Innocenti's artistry really shines.
Right.
He uses Rose's innocence as this kind of filter to gradually reveal these horrors of war without completely overwhelming the reader.
And speaking of Rose, her name is so significant. We talked about the Rose Blanche resistance group,
Right.
but I'd love to hear more about them. What were they actually doing to resist the Nazis?
Well, their methods of resistance were very varied.
Okay.
They would distribute leaflets with anti-Nazi messages,
Wow.
often risking their lives just to spread the word. Some of them created underground newspapers to counter the propaganda that was being spread by the Nazi regime.
Wow.
And some of them even helped people escape persecution,
Oh, wow.
hiding them giving them false documents,
Yeah.
anything they could do to help.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's so brave. I mean, these were just young people, students, going up against this huge, powerful regime.
They were, and sadly, many of them paid the ultimate price for their courage.
Yeah.
But by naming his protagonist Rose Blanche, Innocenti is making sure that their story is not forgotten. He's connecting Rose's small acts of compassion to this larger historical narrative of resistance.
It really makes you think about the different ways that people can resist injustice, even in the darkest of times.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be these huge gestures, right? Sometimes those small acts of kindness can be so incredibly powerful.
Exactly. Rose's decision to help the children, it might seem insignificant compared to these huge atrocities, but it represents this refusal to be complicit in that system of oppression. And that in itself is resistance.
It's a message that resonates so deeply, even today. Right.
We all face situations where we have to choose whether to speak up or to stay silent,
Yeah.
to act or to look away. And Rose Blanche reminds us that even these small acts of courage can make a difference.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that makes this book so timeless. It's not just a story about World War II. It's a story about the human spirit and its capacity for kindness and resistance in the face of evil.
You know, you mentioned earlier that the ending of Rose Blanche really stuck with you.
Yes.
That gunshot and Rose's disappearance.
Yeah,
It leaves so many questions unanswered.
it does.
Why do you think Innocenti chose to end the book that way?
Well, that's a great question, and I think it's honestly one of the most brilliant aspects of this book.
Okay.
By leaving that ending ambiguous, Innocenti forces us to confront the harsh realities of war and, the uncertain fates of so many innocent people.
It doesn't give us easy answers or a sense of closure, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It's unsettling, but so thought-provoking. It really challenges us to think about what happened to Rose Bumble, to those children in the camp,
Yeah.
to all those who disappeared during the war.
Right.
It invites us to grapple with the complexities of history
Yeah.
and the lasting impact of these events, long after, the guns have fallen silent.
And perhaps it also encourages us to seek out more information, to learn more about this period
Yeah,
and the people who lived through it, to not let their stories be forgotten.
absolutely. I think Rose Blanche is a great starting point for further exploration,
Yeah,
a catalyst for deeper understanding, and that's one of the most valuable things a book can do.
I couldn't agree more.
Spark curiosity, a thirst for knowledge.
So we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into Rose Blanche. We've explored the plot, the historical context, the symbolism, deeper themes.
Right.
But there's one more aspect I want to touch on before we move on. The book's impact and legacy.
Yes, that's an important point. Rose Blanche has had a really profound impact on readers of all ages since its publication.
Yep.
It's been translated into numerous languages, and it's received critical acclaim worldwide.
Right.
It even won the Mildred L. Batchelder Award, which is given to outstanding children's books that are translated into English.
Wow.
And it's been recognized for its artistic merit, its historical significance, and its powerful message.
It's amazing to think about the reach of this seemingly simple children's book. Why do you think it's resonated with so many people all over the world?
I think it's because it speaks to something universal in the human experience.
Right.
It doesn't preach or offer easy answers.
Right.
It simply presents a story, a child's story, that resonates deeply with our own experiences of compassion, loss, and, the search for meaning in this complex world.
Yeah.
And those themes, I think, transcend cultural and linguistic barriers.
Yeah, that's so true. And it reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope.
Yeah.
Always the potential for kindness and resistance.
Absolutely.
And that's a message that continues to inspire and challenge readers today, just as much as it did when the book was first published.
Well said. And with that, I think we've covered a lot of ground here in part 2 of our deep dive into Rose Blanche.
Yeah.
But there's still so much more to explore.
It's amazing how one children's book can really open up so many avenues for discussion about history and art and, the human spirit.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that sometimes the most profound stories are told in the simplest ways.
Yeah, I agree.
But Rose Blanche isn't the only book out there that uses a child's perspective to kind of explore the complexities of World War II.
No, not at all. And I think looking at these other stories can give us an even richer understanding of the war's impact.
Right.
And not just in Europe,
Right.
but all around the globe.
So for our listeners who are now ready to dig a little deeper, what are some other books that you'd recommend?
Well, one that comes to mind right away is A Child in Prison Camp by Shizui Takashima. And this book is actually a memoir told through both words and illustrations about the author's own experience as a child in a Japanese internment camp.
Oh, wow. So we're getting a completely different perspective here.
Yeah.
The viewpoint of someone who was unjustly imprisoned during the war, that must be a really powerful read.
It is. And what's really fascinating is how Takashima, even as a child, uses her art to kind of process this trauma that she was experiencing.
Right.
The illustrations in this book are incredibly detailed and expressive, and they convey, this whole range of emotions from fear and sadness to hope and resilience.
Yeah, it's incredible how art can be such a powerful tool for coping with really difficult experiences.
Yeah.
And this book highlights a side of World War II that we don't often hear about.
Yeah.
The internment of Japanese Americans.
Exactly, and it reminds us that the impact of war goes way beyond the battlefields. It disrupts lives and families and communities
Right.
in ways that we can't even imagine.
Are there any other books that kind of offer this global perspective on the war?
Absolutely. One that stands out is Hiroshima no Pika by Toshi Maruki.
Okay.
It's a beautifully illustrated story that recounts the atomic bombing of Hiroshima
Wow.
through the eyes of a young girl.
That's a heavy topic.
It is.
Especially for a children's book. How does Maruki handle such a sensitive subject?
With such care and sensitivity, the illustrations, they're heartbreaking and hopeful.
Yeah.
They capture the devastation of the bombing while also kind of highlighting the resilience of the human spirit.
Right.
It's a really powerful testament to the enduring strength of hope, even in the face of, such unimaginable tragedy.
Yeah, it sounds like a book that could spark a lot of important conversations.
Yeah, it does.
About peace and the importance of understanding different perspectives.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that the consequences of war, they can last for generations,
Yeah.
The bombing of Hiroshima wasn't just this event in the past. It was a human tragedy with huge implications.
Right. And these are just a few examples, right? There are so many other children's books out there that explore these themes of war and peace and resilience.
You're exactly right. And I think each book offers this really unique window into the human experience during wartime.
And, it's a reminder that even amidst the darkness of war, there are always stories of hope and resilience and the enduring strength of the human spirit.
Absolutely. And those stories have the power to inspire us and to challenge us.
Right.
And ultimately to guide us toward a better future.
Well said. Well, it looks like we've reached the end of our deep dive into Rose Blanche. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
Exploring not just the book itself,
Right.
but the wider world of children's literature that deals with these really important themes.
We hope this episode has encouraged you to seek out these books, to engage with these stories, and to keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. Remember, every book is a window into a different world,
It is.
a different perspective. So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those conversations alive.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating exploration. Until then, happy reading.